faster, young bad girls do it well. Live faster, young bad girls do it well.
Hello and welcome to the Dollhouse. My name is Kit Kowalski. I'm an Australian feminist researcher and blogger. I'm joined by my co-host Edie Wyatt, who writes for The Spectator and whom you can find on Substack. We're here to talk about sex, gender, and all the nonsense in the Antipodes. How's it going this week, Edie?
I'm going well. I don't have any my usual complaints this week. I start by complaining about my health, but this week I'm fine. How about you? What have you been up to? You've had a few wins this week, haven't you?
Oh yeah, we've had quite a few wins actually. So some of them I can talk about, and some of them are a little bit hush hush.
Good.
But look, let's just say that great things happen when women work together. That's we might cover a couple of them as we go through the show, but
yeah,
it's been a really, really busy couple of weeks, and I think with activism there's a real ebb and flow to it, and sometimes you feel like there's a lot going on and it will never end and you'll never get through it, and
you get disheartened, don't you?
Yeah.
And then you get a bit of a shot in the arm.
Yeah. And look, one thing that was really good was 4 of us women went out leafleting on the weekend, and
where'd you do that?
It was really good. If you're ever in doubt about whether or not the general public supports women and women's rights, get out and do a bit of leafleting.
That's what the local ladies say as well.
Yeah. Or get out with your sign, and you'll get a couple of people who are like, oh no, or might call you a name or something. But and it was really good. So we're in Sydney, and we went to one location where we met up, and there was not a lot of people there. So I said, oh look, let's jump in my car and we'll go to a nearby suburb. And we ended up at a place called Marrickville. Now, if you're in Sydney, you'll know that this is the belly of the beast. This is one of the heartlands of, as they call it, queer Sydney. This is the LGBTIQA alphabet soup capital. So we just stood at a busy shopping centre called Marrickville Metro. People came past and said, can we give you a leaflet about women's rights? And most people took it. Quite a few stayed for a chat. One man, it was quite cute. He sort of came up and he said, my wife will be in touch with you. Which was nice. Hopefully she has got in touch. I'm not sure.
There's a lot of wives, isn't there?
Yeah. I
went to an Australian thing last night. I was been tweeting about it today and complaining. One of my followers just said, look, there's a Australian podcasting event happening in the city. And it's free for subscribers, and I'm a subscriber of the Australian. So I went along, and there was free booze and food, which is nice, and a nice posh little city hotel. So that's always a bit nice, isn't it? And I thought they had 2 Australian journalists there, as well as Claire Harvey was hosting. And so I thought I'd ask them some questions, because they were seasoned Brisbane journalists, and they do podcasts pretty much on women who've been murdered. Their names were Hedley Thomas and David Murray, and they've done quite a few famous ones, and I've had them on Sky News as well. They do good work, but ultimately they're blokes talking about violence against women. And Hedley said a thing that I found questionable. Someone said to him, how do you pick your things? And he said, well, we profile the victims, right? We wouldn't choose, he said, for instance, someone who was a criminal or a drug addict of the women who had been murdered. And anyways, I took a bit of exception, and I introduced myself, and I talked about how I was interested in women's rights, and I thought that journalists at the Australian had failed women. And in Queensland, we have the, Shannon Fentiman's brought in those laws, and I felt like the Australian weren't aggressive enough in showing our side of the case, because we had a very good argument and a very good Liberal argument. Anyways, I had this thing, and the woman with the microphone, I had the microphone, and she came and took it off me. Claire Harvey signalled to take it off me, and she just had no intention of answering. And she said, "There's another question at the back," without even asking the journalist to answer my question.
Oh,
and
wow.
Thankfully, Headley said, "Oh, hang on, let me just ask that. Let me just address that question."
Mm.
And he did. And afterwards, he was very nice, but she was so rude. And I was
Wow.
really shocked, because I thought conservative side of journalism would be a bit more, but she was clearly, a bit on the trans side. And that surprised me, that she would be so openly hostile, particularly since I pay my subscription.
That's really interesting, isn't it? So I think there is a flavor of conservative that doesn't really want to admit that women do have special needs.
Yes, I think so. And there was a
Yeah.
time when she gave out the 1-800-RESPECT or the 1300-RESPECT number, and she apologized for it.
Why?
Yeah, I know. She said, "Well, if you're going to roll your eyes at this," and I thought, you're talking about dead women and women that are murdered and grooming and really tough stuff.
Mm.
Why would you apologize? And it was like she was feeding to that right-wing audience, but at the same time, treating me like I was the sort of garbage man. Yeah, it was weird. It felt weird. It's a strange political landscape, isn't it? Sometimes we don't know. My husband said to me that it was very middle class, upper middle class, very posh. Felt like the Joe years for me. The Joe years where there was an elite and you sort of couldn't question them. And he said to me, "These are not your people." And I thought, well, I kind of thought they were now. I thought the conservative side, but you never know. We are our own people. I think the gender critical movement is very much its own thing.
I think we are. We're definitely we need to differentiate ourselves, and we can't be indulging in that fantasy that there's no difference between men and women. And we can't be, and I think it is like it is sort of a liberal feminist fantasy, and you can believe it. Like if you're a middle-aged, middle-class professional woman, maybe you've got kids, but they're in daycare and you still have a career. You're probably fit and strong, probably, fitter than half the guys in your office. You work in an office.
Particularly if you've never experienced family violence or that kind of thing.
If you're protected from sexual violence on a daily basis, you probably can believe that fantasy that, equality is here and women are just, a neutrally different type of person. There are two equal types of people, men and women, and there's nothing between them.
No, that's right. So yeah, I had that vibe from her. I felt very elite, very middle class. The way that the middle class used to address family violence, which was kind of down their nose, is something that happened to other people. One of the criticisms I had of the podcast is that they are all middle class. There's two men, I don't want to criticize them too much because I know they do good work and they're journalists, but they trade almost exclusively in the murder of middle class women. That's what their stories are all about. And I think that if you do that, you owe a voice to feminist critique. I think that me standing up and saying, "Look, I'm a feminist," I think they owe me an answer, in a sense, because it's a question and answer thing. I know that probably sounds a bit arrogant, but they're men. They're talking about the murder of women. I do think they should be answerable to people, the public, particularly women, who ask some questions about how they choose critique the class, put a class analysis on what they do.
You know, when you use it, when you're engaging with like true crime and using true crime as entertainment, it crosses the line.
It does, yeah, a bit. Yeah.
I did used to listen to, it was a true crime podcast called My Favorite Murder. And yeah, it's just as trashy as it sounded. The first couple, and it was, you know, these two sort of youngish women, and they would research like really bizarre murder cases, and they were very genuinely interesting to listen to. But after I listened to the first couple, it just became it was just tragedy porn,
like voyeurism. Yeah, it does
was.
get engaging. You know,
there was horrible stories, and you just realize like these are people, it's people's lives that you're talking about.
Yeah, a bit like the true crime documentaries on TV. I watched a few of those, I think, you know, and I very quickly got they started to make me a bit sick. You know, I just need the facts, and I can imagine what's happened behind the scene. I don't need it described. But I think, you know, that one of the topics they talked about was Baden Clay, Alison Baden Clay, who was murdered by her husband in the western suburbs here. And, you know, a lot of the people that you know them, or know the real estate agent, or know, you know, like people we know, he sold their house, and, you know, that kind of thing. You do get sucked into it because, you know, he's murdered his wife, and it's happened in your sort of community. So yeah, you do get caught into it, and I'm not criticizing that, but I tell you what, I was taken back. My husband rarely sees me speechless, but I was speechless. I was treated like the transactivists would treat me, which surprised me. And I didn't go in there, you know. I can imagine that you know, wouldn't think that I would go in there terribly rude, but I was firm in my questioning and pretty direct. And you know, maybe that's,
you never know what they're reacting to, whether or not it's your questioning or your demeanor.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And you know, you're criticizing, they're in a environment where they're kind of there's a fandom. You know, people were fanning them, being fangirls on them, and the majority of their audience is women. So that was interesting. And there was a bit of a fan thing going on, and then I get up and say, hey, you guys have really dropped the ball on women. So it was a bit of a party pooper, I guess, you know. Negative Nelly.
Like women's rights were removed from them in Queensland, and who reported on that news?
Yeah, you put one article about it in the Australian.
It's not good enough.
It's not good enough, no. And I thought I would interrupt their nice little middle class, although I did have a couple of champagnes, sparkling wines, and it was delicious. A couple of little snacks, which were very nice. In fact, yeah, little hamburgers, you know, those little sliders I have. It was delicious. Oh, yeah. So I did get my I probably got my subscription money back in food and wine. Almost. Anyway, we're going to talk about a couple of news things tonight.
Well, yeah, we've got a lot happening this week. So,
yeah.
Do you want to kick us off with
we've got this lovely lady.
Oh yes, isn't she beautiful?
Who's come up on the tweets today, and it's been a little bit hilarious because what's his story? Because he's so obviously a bloke. You know, he looks like a bloke you might meet down at the RSL, and he looks like he's got a wig on that, you know, that's probably seen a better day. He's got this sort of mess of polyester on his head, and the thing says, woman jailed. Oh, hang on, I've lost the.
Yeah, it says.
Yeah. You go.
The Daily Mirror has reported woman jailed for nurse sex assault, groped female guards as they served her food. That's a really womanly thing to do, isn't it?
It doesn't seem very ladylike at all. It says here an inmate And now you click on it, it says prisoner jailed. So they've obviously changed it because the community notes has added context. Now we've got on X, we have this community notes thing where people add context and it says, this is not a woman, this is a man.
I love the community notes feature. It just gets that little tiny bit of accountability to the utter lies.
Katana Paris has convictions for 87 offences, including sexual assault by touching. She was given extra 6 months at the end of a sentence for attacking a nurse. Now, this lovely lady would be and is in a man's prison in the UK. In Australia, he would be in a women's prison.
He would be, yeah.
Yeah, so
they have discretion. In Australian prisons, there is almost total discretion about whether or not to house a man in women's prisons. And it's been like that for actual decades. Very few people know that there is discretion, which means that the warden can basically choose.
Yes. Yeah. And, you know, once that person's in there, they can be housed with the woman who is the naughtiest of all the prisoners. So you can essentially subject whoever you like to torture, to rape, because they don't behave. If there's a prisoner that's misbehaving, you might say, well, that doesn't happen, but they're allowing it to happen. So why wouldn't it happen if you're putting a corruption like that in the system? So, yeah.
The thing that really stuck in my mind about housing men in women's prisons is that the rating scales of severity, like, you know, the minimum security, maximum security, ultramax, they're different for men and women.
Yes.
So a woman's maximum is like a men's minimum. But if you're transferring a man from maximum to a male's maximum to women's maximum, that's basically women's super max. But they don't have that for women.
No.
Because we're on the whole, we're not violent like that.
Women's profile, you know, when you look at intelligence and all the rest of it, it's very similar. But when you look at women as prisoners, the criminality of female to male is very different. It's apples and oranges.
10 times as many men incarcerated in Australia than women.
Yeah.
And that statistic holds worldwide.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, you know, if we keep being allowed to tweet whatever we want, who knows?
Who knows what will happen?
They're going to have to build another prison
especially for Twitter. Have an X on it.
Have a Twitter prison.
That'll be us. Yeah, we who say the wrong things. This is another thing we're going to talk about tonight. We've had a blackout, pretty much a media blackout on some of these issues in Australia. I don't want to put too fine a point on that because it's not as bad as it is in New Zealand. But very, very little, which is what I turned up to the Australian event to tell them that they need to do better. Channel 7 this week have done better. They've surprised us all, I think.
They did really well. So we've known for a little while that when was it? Was it about a month ago or maybe 2 months ago? ABC Four Corners did a really one-sided report called Blocked, which was not really about puberty blockers and how they are blocking you, but how some youth are being blocked from accessing the blockers by those naughty clinicians at Westmead Children's Hospital. And so a couple of the things that came out of that is, one, that we know they interviewed Courtney Coulson, who is a Perth detransition woman.
Very briefly.
And, they interviewed her for over 4 hours. So they were in contact with her for weeks and weeks and weeks, and they interviewed her for over 4 hours, and they showed about 30-45 seconds of her on screen. And she was quite livid. And then in the wake of that coming out, we started to hear rumblings that Channel 7 were going to do a special report on detransition and childhood transition regret. And, you know, when you hear these things, you start to think, oh, which way is it going to go? Are they going to both sides it? Are they going to try to apologize the whole way through?
Will they come under pressure of the press council or, you know, all the many captured organisations that are involved in censoring the media?
Will they lose their bottle at the last minute? You know, what's going to happen? But I've got to say, we were cheering the whole way through. I was watching it and I was on a chat with some other women, and it was dynamite. So if you haven't checked it out, absolutely do. I'll put a link in the show notes.
And they put the extended interviews on 7plus as well, which makes all the difference. I'll play this little bit of some of it of our friend Ian Hickey, Professor Ian Hickey, who made an absolute dickhead out of himself.
Actually,
I don't know if that's being too unfair.
Well, so this is really interesting when you just sort of said earlier about middle class people who don't like to be challenged. Ian Hickey was in the Four Corners episode Blocked, and he was not challenged in that. He was, everything he said was accepted uncritically. Now in the 7 Spotlight episode, Liam Bartlett really took him to task. Now, it was a bit of a tabloid sort of, you know, pin him to the wall kind of interview. And they were talking over each other. It was quite adversarial. But on the other hand, I think we felt it was so good to have someone stand up and say, no, I'm going to pin you to the wall on this one. I really want an answer.
And the professor was flustered, wasn't he? He was getting quite angry, and you could see that he seemed like a very angry man.
Yeah.
A lot of repressed anger there. So we saw some of that. I'll play that. There's only 2 minutes here. I'll play that.
You explain a child being put on puberty blockers, irreversible damage after just one consultation.
Let's go back.
No, could you address the question?
No, I think you also need to address the questions of, are you presenting an accurate picture? And I'd say, no, you're not. There's always the possibility that medical care in any situation is not optimal. But if you talk about what is standard care in Australia in this area,
you're
delivered
using
by
a lot of bureaucratic phrases.
It's not bureaucratic.
With respect, how many times have you come down from your academic ivory tower and spoken to the people on the ground?
I speak to kids.
How many times have you spoken to the children?
I speak to kids
where
every
it's gone
day.
Wrong,
I speak
and
to
the
kids.
Parents who are terrified.
I speak to kids every day and to parents every day who've gone through this situation, including those who've not been able to access care in the past, including those who go along and decide at various points to say, I'm happy to stop where I'm at. When you come back later in life and people may change their minds, that's entirely possible.
Well,
but to say somebody did the wrong thing at the time is also not true.
Professor, answer me this. You're happy to see a 15-year-old girl go and have a double mastectomy, are you?
No, not necessarily. And as is the case in Australia, again, the case in Australia about kids at certain ages moving from just blocking to actually hormonal treatment to then potentially surgical is taken typically in a very considered way and not at early ages.
So at 15 years old, a child who is not legally deemed responsible enough to drive a car is somehow deemed medically fit enough to decide to mutilate her body surgically.
The language, no, your language used, first use language of mutilation, okay? The attempt to vilify the doctors involved and vilify the people involved, I think is entirely inappropriate.
I'm not vilifying anybody, I'm saying it's mutilation. For example, I mean, if you change your mind 4 years later and you've lost your breasts, you'd be pretty unhappy about it as well.
At 15 years old, children entered into the process of starting to be involved in their own medical decision-making around contraception, around their own health. Children get involved at 15 and having to make decisions about all sorts of surgical procedures and other areas affecting their health. You try to make fun of the academic things.
I don't think it's funny at all.
You've already tried.
I think the casualties involved in this are incredibly sad.
And then he goes on to say, you know, go and ask the Royal Society of Psychiatrists, which made me delighted, because we know that Stephen Southers spoke in front of the Royal Psychiatry's, the Royal Australian New Zealand Royal College of Psychiatrists, and said that he doesn't have any evidence for the effectiveness of this treatment in helping the mental health of young people. We also know that 15-year-olds are getting their breasts surgically removed. We've had an example of that, very clear example of that in Queensland. And we've had plastic surgeons say that they're prepared on audio, so that they're prepared to remove the breasts of girls as young as 13. So it's constant deflection and lies from these guys.
And but at 15, you're getting involved in your other medical care around contraception.
Like it's the same.
I mean, look, there is, I don't think we can be too sort of moral about whether or not children should be being sexually active at that age. The fact is that there are some children who
we know
are
that
sexually active.
They do get prescribed contraception.
And they do get prescribed contraception.
Yeah.
And this is literally so that they don't get saddled with a child when they are still a child.
And because it's no harm to them. I mean, you can talk about the risks of the pill with blood clots and things like that. They're very minor risks. They're not like stopping your puberty, which is irreversible.
Again, I think it's apples and oranges to say that kind of thing. And one of the things that I think Hickey brings up here in a little bit later in the interview is he says that what is it? You can consent to having your appendix out or something like that. Do you think that children shouldn't be having surgery, or they shouldn't be getting their appendix out?
And there's risks associated with that.
Risks. There's risks of getting your appendix out. That's it. And the thing is, if I went to the hospital today and I said, look, I identify as someone who doesn't have an appendix, please take it out, they would say, no, that is an unnecessary surgery. We're not going to put you under a general, because they don't like putting people under general, because they know every time you put someone under, there is a teeny, tiny risk that they won't wake up again.
Yeah.
Or that they'll have a brain clot, or there'll be some other thing, they'll be brain damaged or have some other problems. And every time you put someone under, you increase their odds just a teeny, tiny bit. And they don't like doing it.
No, and there's well-established procedures around appendicitis and around most issues. And he says that as well. These organs are going to fail. They interfere with organs because they're going to fail. So he puts the example, and Stathis does that too. He says, if we don't do something, if we don't act, not acting is acting. Not acting is endangering that person. But there's no evidence that that's the case. In fact, the evidence is if you leave them to go through puberty, they almost always will overcome it. And they've got this idea that they can predict this small amount of people who wish they had it's a ridiculous calculation. And there is no way to tell who will and who won't, benefit from the stopping of their puberty. And there's no evidence that anyone benefits at all, ever, from the stopping of their puberty.
What they found from the Westmead study was that their exclusion criteria was actually very good, right? So they did a longitudinal study over 10 years. They had was it just over 100 or just under 100 participants, and they followed the ones that they excluded from treatment and the ones that they included. And the ones that they excluded, none of them came back a second time later on after puberty and said, actually, I'm trans. All of the ones that they excluded desisted. So that's great. They did a good job there.
Yeah.
The ones that they included, some of them desisted or did some other things. So,
but once you've had your puberty stopped, there's no way you're putting that person on a pathway. So there's actually no real way to say whether that person's benefited or not. Well, the only thing they use is desistance and regret.
Well, what they'll use is suicide. What they use is suicide.
Yeah.
And they basically say, if you don't commit suicide, you're a success story.
Yeah. Well, the statistics on suicide are not clear.
No.
There's no benefit to the affirmation model. The only benefit is that it gives the society a way to shut women up, because they pretend that the speech against the true speech is going to harm the person, the trans person. Every time we come out and say something, we get the trans activists come back with more nonsense.
They absolutely love to shut down speech, and they love to bring up the spectre of suicide to do it.
They do.
So speaking of speech and speeches, so the inimitable Claire Chandler, we might remember that, was it last week or maybe 2 weeks ago now? I'm losing time. Some wonderful women from the Women's Rights Network Australia, specifically a woman who is an artist called Biddy O'Loughlin, went to an event where Julia Gillard was speaking. She asked Julia Gillard a question. What is a woman? And Julia Gillard responded with 4 minutes of solid gold political waffle about gendered souls and being kind, and, you know, not everyone's going to be an elite sportswoman, etc. Well, one of the things that we need to understand is that Julia Gillard was the Prime Minister when the definitions of man and woman were removed from the Sex Discrimination Act back in 2013. Now, Claire Chandler has got up in the Parliament and she has actually made note of this, and she's put it on the record, and she's made a very clear link between those two. And it's just beautiful. Shall we play it?
Yep.
Australians were shocked to see our first female Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, dodging the question, what is a woman, when asked recently by a member of the Women's Rights Network Australia at an event.
To your seat, Senator Chandler. Senator Polly, point of order. What is the point?
I think it's appropriate to give the title the first female Prime Minister of this country with respect. So I would remind, through you, to use people's proper title.
Thank you.
This is Senator for Tasmania.
Of the standing orders.
I believe I did refer to the Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, and that is my understanding of what is in accordance with the standing orders. Thank you. I might start again. Australians were shocked to see our first female Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, dodging the question, what is a woman, when asked recently by a member of the Women's Rights Network Australia at an event about women's advancement. Ms Gillard described this question as a gotcha parlour game, but it is no game. The reason people ask leaders this question is because women's single-sex spaces and sports depend on it. A woman is an adult human female. Only those who are happy to let males into women's spaces, or who are too scared of abusive activists to answer the question truthfully, have any difficulty saying that. The reason it was particularly pertinent to ask Ms Gillard what is a woman is because it was the Gillard government in 2013 that removed the definition of woman from the Sex Discrimination Act. And it was that decision which led directly to some of the most perverse policy decisions Australia has ever witnessed. And it is the failure of leaders to answer the question, what is a woman, that covers up the horrific impacts of this policy failure.
Yeah.
So well done, Claire Chandler, and well done, Women's Rights Network of Australia.
Absolutely. It's just a beautiful example of women coming together and making magic, I must say.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. So, and well done to Biddy. So they're actually, what they've done is they've got some, I think they've got some signed copies of the palm cards where they printed out the questions, and they're going to auction them off. So Biddy's actually, she's an artist and a comedian, and she wants to go to Edinburgh Fringe. So they're going to try to raise some money to to go into her, which I think is lovely. We'll put the link to that if it's still up
Yeah,
in the notes.
good on them.
Yeah.
Now, this week we've had Reem Salem also come under attack in the UN. Reem Salem has been on our side in the UN. It's been great to have special rapporteur, she for the violence against women and girls in the UN that's on our side. Of course, she's come under attack. The trans activists can't bear a woman being in a position of power and knowing what a woman is and being able to speak up for women and girls throughout the world. You know, we talk about our needs in terms of keeping women out of men out of women's prisons and all the rest of it. The needs are next level for women around the world in terms of women who are suffering under very oppressive patriarchy and, you know, poverty. We need to be able to identify women internationally if we're ever going to be, you know, trying to alleviate poverty and violence against women. So there's been the 18th of May, the Association for Women's Rights in Development published a statement on its website entitled "There's no place for anti-trans agenda in the UN," which came specifically against Reem. It was signed by 844 organisations and individuals. Now, this is the response to that. And Reem has, on the 25th of June 2003, a day before interactive dialogue at the Human Rights Council, 781 organisations and more than 2,600 individuals from over 60 countries signed a letter entitled "Let the UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls Deliver Her Mandate." Yeah. So we've got two sides happening here, yeah?
Yeah, and it's playing out at all levels across the globe.
Yeah.
It is so important to realise that this is a global women's struggle.
Yeah.
And our struggle is the struggle of women across the world, in Mexico, in Brazil, in Afghanistan, in the UK, the US, New Zealand, Australia, even in Tasmania, right? And our struggle is the same.
Yeah.
So one of the quotes I've just picked out from Reem's letter, because it's really pertinent to what's happening here in Australia at the moment. There is a push for anti-vilification laws to come in at a federal level, which is just going to chill our speech. She says, at the same time, I'm aware in other countries, some governments are charging ahead with amendments to their free speech laws that would stifle healthy discussions on sex, gender, and gender identity, among others, as well as adopt self-ID laws without considering recent evidence, including that produced by authority in the medical field. And there, she's not talking about Ian Hickey and Stephen Stathis, but the appendix is going to burst if we don't act sort of medical evidence. She's talking about actual studies that show that puberty blockers and gender medicine do not have a positive effect, and that they have been discontinued in multiple countries around the world.
And self-ID is leading to violence against women. I think is pretty clear. They say we have no evidence for that, but what they mean is that women are self-protecting. What they want to see is women raped in these facilities by trans-identified males and in massive numbers. And if that doesn't happen, they tell us there's no danger, as if that's the meter of how well our facilities are going. No, doesn't matter to them what it tells to young girls who have to accept a grown man into her space, the kind of rape culture that builds in the culture and what that effect has on not just that girl, but girls in general. And the emboldenment that we're seeing with trans activists who, are threatening violence against us constantly. And, just other men who see that women's rights are being eroded and find that a reason to have a pass with violence.
Well, it's even the evidence of sexual violence is not enough for them.
No.
Because if you will point out women are being raped.
That's right.
Or there are rapists who are declaring a gender identity, or there are murderers who are declaring a gender identity to go into a women's prison or to get special treatment.
Yeah.
We
showed that data too.
You're
Yeah.
vilifying trans people.
Yeah.
By saying
she wouldn't accept it. We had international data that showed that men take a trans identity in prisons to gain access to women, sex offenders specifically. Yeah. It's clear data, and she wouldn't accept it. So this is not about that. We have to keep making these arguments to dickheads, but there's another level here where they want the government control that comes with this belief system, gender identity ideology, and they love to have it in all the things, but it's based on very little evidence.
I think there is a point in any abusive relationship, and here I'm talking about the relationship of women worldwide with government.
Yes.
There's a point in any abusive relationship where you realize that it's not about fairness, and it's not about argumentation, and it's not about who's right, and it's not about who should have done the dishes. It is about control, and the only way that you're going to actually resolve the situation is to refuse.
Yes.
And you have to refuse to participate, and that is why we have to see women standing up for their rights. So whatever that means, we have to stand up for our rights.
Yes, that's right.
It's about pushing back and saying no, because waiting for someone to see the truth is not going to resolve this situation.
No, it's not rational. We have to keep making the arguments and showing people, because when they show their arguments, we have to say, no, that's not true, which is one of the things about the suicide risk that we've talked about, and the evidence that Dr. Stathis has admitted is not there for what's called affirming care. That all that medical knowledge forms the basis of the policies that they're using to silence us. So we'll find some, and they're funding them. They're funding the shit out of them, the conservative governments and the left-wing governments alike. So one of the things this has led to is we're going to subject you to a bit of a webinar that Kit's found. Kit loves these things. Secretly, she searches the internet for them and finds them in dark corners.
To be fair, to me, I had help with this one.
People do give us things.
To be fair, I was not stalking this particular one, but look, I've been aware of the Trans Justice Project for a little while. It's run by a bloke called Jackie May Turner, and I saw him on Instagram he's quite slick. He's got some good graphic designers, or he's got some good graphic design skills on board. And I think I'll give him some dues. I think he's a good social media campaigner. He really does know how to leverage that social media communication, and he does know how to do a good campaign to spur people to action. I saw him actually doing some fundraising. It was very successful a couple of months ago, and he uses the money that he gets from his donors, but also from the Victorian Pride Lobby, from ACON, and from the government and all those other sources to do research and produce artifacts such as the unironically named Fueling Hate report. And this is like this is like the least self-aware name I've ever seen on a document.
And the most hateful people in our society.
So look, he's done a little webinar. He released the report on the 29th of August. And I think it was last night they did a little webinar to try to get trans people. So they're doing a little campaign. And the idea is that that if you register, they will send you up to 3 high-quality printed copies of the report in the mail. And then on the week starting the 18th of September, they want you to go and hand deliver it to your MP and then snap a little selfie with the MP and talk to them about how you're a trans person and you feel unsafe and you really want your MP to promote federal anti-vilification law, which will silence women.
Us.
That's us. Yeah, will silence us and stop us from saying Jackie May Turner is a man. Or if we knew Jackie May Turner's previous name, it would stop us saying his previous name, or stop us waving our little flags. So they can wave their flags because those flags aren't hateful, but our flags are hateful, apparently. Stop us putting our little adult human female stickers on things. And also, look, I don't really go out of my way to say that Jackie May Turner is a man. I don't go out of my way to find his real name and tell people or find pictures of him before he started wearing dresses and having long hair. But you know what? Jackie May Turner doesn't seem to understand that the kind of loopholes he wants to put in the law will allow abusers and sex offenders to change their name and prevent anyone from discussing their previous life, their crimes committed under their male name. Right?
Yeah.
He doesn't understand how identity fraud works.
These men have got no concept of the vulnerability of the female body and how we have to live our lives and how we prosecute crime and how we rely on,
Yeah.
Anyways,
so
I'll play from.
So we listen to his lovely voice, telling us all
the things. Yeah.
Yeah,
telling us about 5 minutes. Yeah, or 4.
Well, that was 5 minutes.
So the reason why we launched this report was because I think it was March or April. A lot of trans people were talking about the increased harassment and abuse that they were facing, both online, on the internet, and in person. We were seeing the rise of the sort of Save Our Children, like anti-drag protesters and the shutting down of LGBT events, first in Victoria and then all over the country.
We did a
We were
special
also
on that. Yeah.
seeing Posey Parker do her tour around Australia, of which the event in Melbourne was attended by a group of neo-Nazis, and then also the organising of the Christian Lives Matter group here in Sydney. So what we wanted to look at was, okay, how is this actually, can we trace the line from 3 years ago to now and look at the increase in anti-trans hate over that time, and specifically how anti-trans hate has increased over the last couple of months, where all of this.
We have shown some of those issues. That is Christian Lives Matter. There's Lebanese that we featured a while back.
Yeah.
Posey Parker's there, obviously. We know the Nazis didn't come to her rally. The Nazis just turned up independently because they wanted to cause trouble. We also covered that. We've tried to be really clear about what the truth is compared to what these guys lie about. The way you can tell if a trans activist is lying is that their lips are moving. These guys they constantly, this is just a whole seminar of lies.
Like if they stop lying, I don't know. Do they drown or something?
If the tree falls in the forest, maybe it's if the trans activists stop lying.
They actually, in this report, like this report is, which I have read, it is again full of lies. So they love that the neo-Nazi Kelly J. Keane link. They make a lot of that. But one of the things that they say is that the neo-Nazis had a sign calling trans activists pedophiles.
Yeah,
that's
which is
untrue.
funny because they said what their sign said was something like "down with pedo freaks" or something, didn't it?
Yeah, destroy pedo freaks.
Yeah, so they didn't mention the fact that they identified as pedo freaks.
I mean, if someone came to my house with a sign that says destroy pedo freaks, I would wonder who they're talking
Who's
about.
talking about, that's right.
I wouldn't think that was directed at me.
No. Nor would you think it was about your husband. You wouldn't think it was about anyone that you
wouldn't
know.
even occur to me.
You would say, where are the pedo freaks in my neighborhood?
I would say, yes, let's talk about that. It's this report is yeah, it's definitely a work of fiction.
Yes, well, hate is being reinterpreted as any woman who establishes that she is a female person and she will not tolerate lies, pretty much.
So, I mean, there's a couple of features of here I did really want to call out because it's quite interesting. So they've produced let's see, it's a sort of 30-page or 28-page report about a 3-minute survey that they've done. So they've undertaken a 3-minute survey, and there's quite a bit about Kellie J. Keane in the report itself.
They're obsessed with her
several times. She's in their heads.
She's got the free real estate.
She's living rent free in their heads. It's really funny. And so there's a lot of really strange things about this report. So one, it talks about how, they put a survey out on Facebook and they promoted it in their communities. Now, that's great and everything, but it's not really rigorous. It's not a rigorous methodology.
Data. We can't really call that data, can we?
No.
If we did a Facebook amongst our turfy friends, we did a little survey, we probably would contextualize it. We would probably say, 94, like they've got here, 94% of all participants. We might say 95% of all TERFs.
Yeah.
Think one thing. Why 95% of women's rights activists say this? We wouldn't say as if it's some sort of representative sample of the community.
And so they had 3,099 responses, which is quite a lot. And they've had 40 what they call bad faith responses. And
you know who they are. Oops, they've got the wrong people.
Now, interestingly enough, so they have a whole section, they have like 2 pages dedicated to these 40 bad faith responses. Now,
parents have found out about the survey.
So some of the gender criticals have found out about the survey and have taken part. Now, these 40 bad faith responses, 4 of them were ineligible for the survey, right? So there's whatever criteria it was, like, are you over 18 or do you live in Australia or something like that, didn't meet the eligibility criteria. But they've actually excluded 40 results, although only 4 were ineligible.
So they're not the people they wanted to.
They're not the people they wanted.
The data is so corrupted from these people.
So they're talking about how they're mostly older women. Bad faith responses. And they're putting forth anti-trans perspectives. Hang on. One man identified himself as a Nationalist Socialist Network member who attended the Nazi rally. Well, that's not nice. In his comments, he claimed to have engaged in physical anti-trans violence and repeatedly denigrated trans people as pedophiles. That doesn't sound very polite.
No, it doesn't sound very nice at all.
it was a common theme to assert that LGBTQ organizations are grooming or sexualizing children or otherwise using them to push agendas, all in scare quotes.
No lies detected there.
And several submissions were further preoccupied with the idea of children undergoing surgical transition. In this context, it is essential to note that gender-affirming surgeries are generally unavailable to people under the age of 18. Indeed, these responses displayed a poor understanding of the science and laws around trans healthcare in general.
We know about the science. We know it's bullshit.
Yeah, so, like there was some choice, like not very nice comments that they have, that they've brought out here. But I will also just call out that on page 21, we have evidence that the TRAs have discovered Darvo. So if you're not
they discovered it a long time ago.
But now they've discovered it that they can claim that we're doing it.
Yeah.
So Darvo is a classic transactivist technique, because it's a technique of narcissistic abusers, right? And if you're not sure what that means, it is deny, attack, reverse victim offender. So, if maybe your partner says like, why are you always staying out late? You're always staying out late, I don't know where you are. Make
I'm
me feel
not
nervous.
staying out late. You're staying out late.
Whoa, there you go. See, Edie's all over the Darvo.
I know. Yep.
And then also
picking on me. You're just trying to.
Well, I wouldn't stay out late if you were a better cook or if you were better company.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. If you weren't such an arsehole, I wouldn't have to stay out late all the time.
That's right.
Not that I do. But if I did.
No. But
this is an argument with the transactivists. That's what they say. This is not happening. No one's losing their breasts at 15. But if they are, it's to save their life. They'd be dead otherwise.
And if you don't want that, then
you're literally killing trans children.
That's right.
So
it's funny. So they've got this whole page where they're actually talking about Darvo and they're trying to accuse us of engaging in Darvo. I might read out a little bit of this piece here. Reversing the victim and offender was a common tactic. One older cis man stated that hate, quote, mostly comes from trans people and their allies against women. Another respondent skipped nearly every question to write, quote, I have seen violence by trans activists, end quote, and nothing else. Indeed, several responses framed trans people as inherently anti-woman.
No lies there.
They're so narcissistic that they can't even hear that feedback. They can't take that on board because they must be the victim.
Yeah.
The victim is their identity. They must be the victim.
It's where the power comes from in the inverted sort of intersectional framework.
Yeah. And they've said, respondents, they've tried to reframe it. So they've actually acknowledged that there are some, quote, cis women who received repercussions for engaging in anti-trans hate. And these repercussions were seen by the women as attacks.
Yeah.
So, if you receive a repercussion,
it's your fault.
That's not an attack.
Just like throwing a ball at the wall and having a hit back in your head. That's just
what happens.
So if you want to anti-trans hate, also we need to highlight is calling yourself a woman, saying that women are adult human females, saying that you don't want grown men in the bathroom with young girls, saying that you should have single-sex sports. That's all anti-trans hate. So
Yes.
the capture of that is massive. And they're saying this is violence against women that they're promoting, because they're saying if women come out and say those things, whatever violence they receive is what they deserve.
Correct. Yes.
So they are promoting, this document is actually promoting violence against women. It's excusing it, it's justifying it, it's apologizing, it's apologetics for violence against women, basically. So, you know, they can go stick the whole thing up their ass. If you want to do the opposite and take a picture of yourself with that document and take it down to your local member, and talk to them about some of the points we've raised, then, you know, we won't be stopping you.
So yeah, absolutely. Look, if you think that you can use up to 3 copies of the Fueling Hate report, then I urge you to go to what is it? Transjustice.org.au. You can find the link on their website. You can register. You can receive their up to 3 free copies delivered to you via post, and you can then do
maybe stick an adult human female sticker on the front of it.
It might be a good idea. Yeah.
Take it down to your local member, get a picture, talk to them about the way this rhetoric is fueling violence against women.
Yeah.
And
just the way that they have put this together, it is utterly dishonest. So I'm just trying to find a little bit here. I'm usually a little bit better organized, but you know, there are these really alarming statistics about anti-trans violence increasing, and they link it to the Safe Schools program in 2016. It was, the trans people say it's anti-bullying, but essentially it was like trying to teach children about sex toys and BDSM.
Yeah,
they
it's
link
terrible.
it to the marriage equality. They link it to the Australian newspaper and Bernard Lane's column in the Australian. They link it to Kelly J. Keane coming to Australia. And then they link it to the rise of transphobia in the US, the UK, and Ireland. Happily, they don't seem to really think about us very much. So we're still under their little radar, which is great. Happy about
well, they think we're all minions of Kelly J. Keane, don't they?
Yeah.
We're all in there standing for women. And, you know, we're certainly not against standing for women, but we have our own movements here in Australia, as well as the standing for women people. So
it's so dishonest. I've found this here. They're saying that of 1,309 trans participants, so they've got 3,000 participants. Most of them were not transgender. About half, little less than half of them were. 49.2% had experienced online anti-trans abuse, harassment, or vilification. And then they don't really sort of say how, you know, what did they ask? What's the question that they asked? But they say down here that they had an open text field so people could write in what they wanted, and then they have classified it as hate or not hate or whatever. And here's some of the categories of hate that they're talking about. Microaggressions, deliberate misgendering, insults, ridicule, humiliation, intimidation, and trolling. So it's not a lot of fun to be trolled.
Just replying to something.
Yeah, replying.
If someone says something online, we'll get on and say, you know, that's not true. A bit like the guy, the picture of the guy we showed earlier, and we all said, that's not a woman, that's a man. So according to, you know, we don't want to suggest that they are involved in Darvo, but according to them, or misinformation, God forbid, us saying that reader's context there where it says it's not a woman, it's a man, that's trolling.
That's trolling, that's misgendering, that's abuse.
Misgendering, that's anti-trans hate.
Yeah. Defamation, which is not always nice. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't defame people. And
No.
hate speech, including slurs. Right? So, and we know hate speech is saying woman is an adult human female. Hate speech is saying you can't change sex.
Yes.
Pylons, doxing, and stalking. Okay, so stalking is finding out where someone lives and possibly going to their house. It's very
Have you done
serious.
that anytime recently, Kit? Have you found out where someone's lived that you're not politically aligned with and gone to their house?
I will just do a quick search of the memory banks. I have never done that.
Have you known any women in activist circle? I mean, we both know a lot of women. I've known zero women who have been involved in stalking.
No.
So
and doxing is where you find out someone's real name or you find out where they work and you contact their employer and you try to make trouble for them. I know several women right now who are being threatened through their workplaces.
That's right.
Right? Several.
And our friend Brett was doxed quite mercilessly as well for saying he was a homosexual man.
It was terrible what happened to him. And because he said he was a homosexual, they doxed him.
And he stood up for women's
contacted
rights.
his employer.
Posted his family's detail online. Just relentlessly harassed him. It's not nice. We're not in favor of any of this stuff. And what we engage in, what they call anti-trans hate, is political debate, and research, and the assessment of facts and the display of facts to people about their claims. We question their claims. That's what they call anti-trans hate, because their claims are ridiculous.
They put doxing and stalking next to pylons. So if you've ever been on Twitter or on Facebook, a pylon is where someone says something ridiculous and you say to your mates, hey, come and respond to this person. And you might get, 10 or 15 comments from people saying, oh, you're being ridiculous.
Like we did to Julie Gillard.
Right?
Yeah. It was fun. She could have muted comments,
And they do it to us as well. That's just being online.
That's wrong. And we do it to each other. Let's face it, women, feminists, if you step out of line of the feminist world, you might get a little bit of bad feedback. We saw that this week. There was a battle of the Collins there on the tweets, and we saw people get smacked on the hand for saying stuff that maybe other people didn't agree with. It's Twitter. Kids, if you can't handle criticism, for God's sakes, get off Twitter.
Yeah. And then they've put and then we're down with like the important stuff, threats of violence and sexual assault, death threats, incitements to commit suicide, and bizarrely, incitements to commit genocide. So I think that
queens, aren't they?
It might be a typo because
incitement to commit genocide.
It seems like a weird one to me.
Well, it would be if I was encouraging other people to commit genocide. That seems unlikely. I don't think I've ever heard anyone. I don't even think I've heard trans activists, except for the fact, I mean, some of them have been pretty extreme when they say that they want to kill all TERFs. I'm not quite sure that's genocide. That's political violence, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And this is the thing, that this anti-trans hate, like you go into TERF as a slur, or you go into Twitter on any given day, and
you'll see
yeah. And it's really funny because they talk about the rise in anti-trans hate on Twitter now. And I was just thinking the other day, like how pleasant it is now on Twitter since Elon Musk bought it, how you can say, hey, that's a man,
Yeah.
and you're not worried that your account's going to get like
Yeah.
detonated.
Yeah, that's right. Well, my account was blasted for saying that, I can't even remember, something about lesbians. I said that men pretending to be lesbians was rape culture.
Yeah.
That's what I was permanently banned for. Yeah. Which it is.
Yeah.
And if you can justify a statement, you know, someone should say, well, why is it rape culture? And if you can justify that statement, then, you know, you can.
And then, and if you can't, then you're ridiculous, and people should stop listening to you.
That's right. Yeah. But they don't bother. They don't say, hey, you know, why do you say that? They say, let's report that person and get them off so we can stop them talking. That's what they want. They want to shut us up.
Yeah. Now, is that anti-woman violence, like piling on or getting mass reports or getting your account suspended, or, you know, is that violence? Is that hate?
Misogyny. If you're targeting women for saying that they're women, and getting them suspended, that whole suspended gate thing that was happening with women, most of us would have said that that's systemic misogyny in Twitter. And I do think that was misogyny, but I don't think I called it genocide or anything.
Now, the recommendations in this report, there are 6 recommendations.
Oh, let me surprise me with what they might be.
Well, I think
that we should shut up.
Essentially, yes. Yes. Introduce federal and state anti-vilification laws. Work together with social media companies to stop the spread of anti-trans disinformation. Strengthen media regulations to ensure greater, there's that lovely code word, accountability.
Yep. So that's media censorship
for news outlets.
Personal, getting us arrested, getting us banned from social media, and censoring the forms of media.
Yeah. Investigate community-led interventions to curb anti-LGBTQIA+ extremism.
So that's social, that's cultural intervention into people's lives, like putting signs up in the bathroom saying don't question someone's gender identity if they walk in. So telling a little girl not to question a man as she comes to her, that's cultural intervention, that's rape culture. So rape culture, it's censorship, it's disciplining women, it's rape culture.
And look, it's not a recommendation unless you're asking for some money. So provide funding for research into the causes and impacts of anti-trans abuse, harassment, vilification, and violence, and strategies for addressing them. Well, look, there's really 2 causes. So cause 1 is that men are overstepping their boundaries. And cause 2 is that women are saying no.
Yep. We've done it. We've done the research.
Can we have $50,000?
Can we have the money yet, please?
That was pretty cheap.
We provided that information very quickly.
It was a fast turnaround. Look, that's the Fueling Hate report.
I haven't read much of it. I read a little bit of it, but yeah, Kit's read a lot of it. So yeah, it's a good service you provided for the community there, Kit.
Oh, thank you.
Watching a seminar, listening, reading the report. It's awful. It's like sort of sticking pins under your nails. Very annoying.
So my friend sent me the seminar. She actually listened in live, and she sent me a recording of it. And it's funny, I texted her and I said, "Oh, my eyes are rolling back in my head," and she said, "They'll be there for a while."
Settle in.
Yeah, it was like, so they did this seminar, and essentially they got Jackie May Turner to talk about how, you know, what you need to do. And then they got some other individuals from the trans and ally community. One of them was a woman who founded a project called the Rainbow Community Angels. Now that is that's a community project that promotes drag. So it promotes men like Frock Hudson or Dina Curry, who was previously covered on our show.
There was another thing this week that happened. We had an issue with Frock Hudson, didn't we?
We did.
He made a complaint. He had a tweet, and I'll put the tweet up. Because what happened was the Victorian Pride Centre in St Kilda rejected an application from the Lesbian Action Group to book the premises for a lesbian-born female event. So Dean Akuri, is that his name?
Yeah.
Said, I'm glad they did this. I work in this building, and what was I supposed to do? Not go into work that day? Nothing in the application created space options for anyone who identified outside their brief who needed access to health and support orgs in the space to work there. I'll put a little picture up there of Dean, who is so triggered by lesbians meeting in the same building as him that he couldn't go to work. That despite the fact that we've got pictures of him holding men's cocks, doing all this thing, and he's tried this, and he was one of the drag acts that was
he reached to children. Yeah,
that's right. That is he's targeting children in his acts. He's trying to clean it up, but there's all sorts of pictures of him online where he's being very typically a pretty over sexualized adult performer, which is fine for adult performers, but yeah,
he's a comedian. He does like a full act, like he dresses up in his leather and whips and chains and ball gag and stuff, and he does a comedy act, and it's like it's properly adult entertainment that he gets on with.
But if lesbians are meeting in a building, his building where he works, he can't go to work. If they're just meeting in the same building, he's so traumatized by that idea that lesbians are meeting without any men present that he can't go to work. So yeah, that was another exciting twist for the week.
Yes. Oh, actually I do have two more twists. So a couple of other things I just wanted to mention was now Councillor Melissa Ferguson from, I believe, Latrobe Council. She's tweeted some naughty transphobic hate crimes, such as predators are hiding behind the rainbow and using it as a shield to prey on children. And also the workplace diversity trainings were big business. And she's been sent to re-education camp, and there's been a report into her conduct, and the report has suggested that she issue a full and frank apology.
And she's done so in a very heartfelt way. Is that true, Kit?
She has. I'm going to read out her apology. Now, this was covered in the ABC News. Quoting, as stated in the Arbiter's filing, in each case, the apology must be unreservedly and reference that Councillor Ferguson has engaged in misconduct by breaching the standards of conduct and clauses 1A, 1B, 2D, and 4(1) of Schedule 1 of the Local Governance and Integrity Regulations 2020 through her tweets about the LGBTIQA+ community. End of apology.
Yeah, it's really hitting my heart there.
Is it touching you?
Yeah, very much. Yeah. Well, I did retweet it, and I said, in other words, GFY, and so say all of us.
Yes.
The guy who posted it blocked me. It was very insensitive. Very insensitive of him.
So good on you, Melissa.
Yeah, well done.
Just good on you. Because the thing is, once you apologize, it's never enough for them.
No.
We saw Rasheen Murphy, who was a wonderful singer in the UK. she made some comments on Facebook. She apologized, and it's still not enough. You know,
No,
they're still canceling her.
they don't care.
Her
There's no mercy in their religion.
the record label are giving the proceeds of her album sales to a bloody trans charity.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that we had this week was some guy I've never heard of, John Boyne, issued an apology to Graham Linehan.
Yeah, he wrote the Boy in Striped Pajamas.
Right. I have not read that.
So he's an author. Yeah. Yeah, that was a nice turn, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was.
He
It really
said he
was.
thought about it and he realized that he was wrong, and he apologized. Don't get much of that.
No, and you know, he just said, look, you know, Glenna's always criticizing me, he's always attacking me and whatever, but when I really think about it, he's been hard done by, and that's actually not very nice, and I'm very sorry.
Yeah, good on him. Well
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah, small steps, baby steps. But in the face of this stuff, you know, that they're getting, like most abusers, these guys are getting more aggressive. This document that you've brought us today and that seminar, it's a very aggressive move. They are trying to shut us down, not only shut us down, but justify any violence against us very openly.
Yes.
And so they're getting more bold in what they're doing. And we need to keep, we know that, you know, in the case of domestic violence, the most dangerous time for a woman is when she leaves, when she attempts to leave. And that's a bit, I think we need to be prepared that these guys are going to get more aggressive before they get less aggressive. We've got to keep the pressure on.
100%, and we need to back each other.
Yeah.
So if there's a woman who's standing up to anti-woman violence or just hate, like what we get from these guys, it really is hateful.
Yeah.
And what I find from them online is that you'll say something like, humans can't change sex, and they'll say, you think trans people can't exist? And I'll say, no.
You're genociding me.
Can't change sex. They say, this is genocide. And they don't hear it.
They intentionally, it's intentional. We're not having a conversation with these people.
It's not a conversation. So, you know, it can be dangerous to get involved with these people. And I find that it's often best to not engage them, but to absolutely, if there are women out there who are fighting back, make links with them, see if you can work together, see if you can join a group together, see if you can join Women's Rights Network Australia, or, you know, any group. What is it? Woman Up Queensland is another one that we're quite like.
Active.
Well.
Yeah,
they're very active.
Another speaker's corner coming up on the weekend, I think.
Yeah. And, you know, join with someone and try to do something positive, you know, encourage those women to not just be on Twitter, but also talk to their MP, talk to others in their lives.
Yeah.
You know, get your free copy of the Trans Justice Fueling Hate report and deliver it to your MP and talk to them about the bad practices.
That's right. Make a very simple list of things that are problematic in it, just in case even before they read it, so they can see our points. And then as they read it, they go, of course, you know, it is ridiculous. It doesn't take much to highlight the fact that it doesn't take some, you know, university degree or whatever, to highlight that this has got a couple of points. Keep it simple. Make clear points to them to see how it's harmful to you as well as to your to their men. Most of them are going to be men, to their wives and their daughters. And that's another thing. When I was talking to the Australian guys last night, they were very hostile. The one guy, Hadley, he wasn't hostile. He agreed with me and he came up to me afterwards and he said, And you know why he agreed with me? Because his wife had been raising the issues with him. He said no, and he obviously loved his wife very much, had a long, happy marriage, and he said, I know my wife agrees with you. So he wasn't happy to see me humiliated for asking a question, because he had the voice of his wife in the back of his head. So yeah, make sure you play those cards as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's a lot that you can do, and this is a dangerous time for us because we're standing up and we're saying no. So we just have to back each other.
Yep.
And work together where we possibly can.
Yep.
Yeah, that's our message.
Yeah, and some people are difficult. You know, we're not saying that we're you know
not a love-in
hippie sisterhood. Some people just aren't very nice to work with. So, you know, as Kit says, find someone you like, find someone you can work with. You know, and just keep going. We're not here for a, you know, a hippie good time. We're here to get our rights back, and try and be supportive of each other.
Exactly. And there's a lot of work to be done. And there's a lot of work to be done. So just, you know, figure out what you want to do, and or get together with someone and figure out what you can do together. There's anyone who tells you that there's nothing for you to do, they don't really have a good handle on the situation.
No,
we need doctors, we need lawyers, we need people who are good at graphics, we need people who are good at words, we need people who can stand on a street and hand out a leaflet, we need people who can have a conversation, we need ads, we need people who can wear a t-shirt.
That's right. Yeah.
You know,
I also want to mention that on the 7plus, Dr. Gillian Spencer, it's worthwhile looking up her extended interview online. It's had a lot of attention internationally. A few people have been retweeting that internationally. So yeah, Hickey implied that she was the only doctor, which is not true. Hundreds of doctors are coming forward and supporting Gillian and supporting the inquiry, hopefully an inquiry into the practices and the gender clinics in Queensland.
And that's another thing you can do is, if you go to the doctor, raise it with your doctor. If you feel comfortable, talk to your doctor about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Will we leave it there?
Let's leave it there.
All right. Thank you for joining us again on the Dollhouse. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. We have been seeing on the YouTubes that we're getting a lot more views than we have subscribers. So if you're, you know, hovering over the button, if you're watching it, please give us a thumbs up and, you know, just subscribe. It really helps us out. Thank you very much. The show notes are ending up on Substack, and we're also on Spotify and Google Podcasts. I'm Kit Kowalski, and I'm here with Edie Wyatt, and we'll be back next week with the news and the views in the Aussie Genderverse.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Live fast, die young, bad girls do it well. Live fast, die young, bad girls do it well.